It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and I am excited for today's guest who I just met recently. His name is Sasha. He specializes in childhood trauma, among other things, and here he is. And I know that many of us of origin, and we're dealing with our own difficult situations with our exes and having to share children and custody with them. And we're so terrified in terms of repeating the cycle and our kids not having happy, healthy lives because of their parents or their other parent in particular. So thanks so much for coming on, Sasha. I'm gonna before you even introduce yourself, in your experience, how many people think I want to do better than my parents?
Oh boy, if I had $1, Lisa, for every client that I've had that said those words, I'm pretty sure I'd be retired by now and living somewhere off in the islands.
Mhm. Yeah, so many people do want to do better. It's not like, oh, I had the perfect childhood, but we always think that everybody else has the perfect childhood.
Absolutely, right? I mean, so many of us kind of look at our own experiences and we can find the little pitfalls. And at the same time, what we're exposed to from other people is nothing but the positive sometimes. And what we see is just these big highlights, thinking, oh my gosh, everybody else's life can be so perfect and attuned and easygoing. And what happened to me and what's wrong with mine? My gosh. So, right there.
Right? And like, what did I do wrong?
Yes, yes. And so quickly, like even for us that have been through so much trauma, like in our childhood, it creates this shameful worldview where we do kind of look at these problems we experience through this lens of what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? How did I make this mistake? When most often than not in childhood trauma, those are not our responsibilities, the things that happen to us.
Yeah, and I know in our community, we have a lot of clients who are super successful in many areas of their lives, but they ended up getting involved in an unhealthy relationship, like one in
Yes.
three women and one in five men on average. And
Yeah.
so they feel an even bigger sense of shame because they're looked at as role models, and everyone else is like, I never thought you would get involved with someone like that, or why don't you just like these simple answers to really complex
Yeah.
issues. And so that makes us feel even more isolated.
Absolutely, right? And it's so quick for us to kind of again look at the surface level of certain behaviors or certain relationships, and people will start to question and wonder, how could anybody be with this individual or make this kind of relationship happen? And ultimately, when you really pull back the layers of human beings, we are just so complex in our nature, especially when it comes to relationships, right? Our first foundations in our life, the moment we're born, start in relationships. And so our deepest wounds and underlyings of our nervous systems really transpire into the relationships that we have. And sometimes it's hard for people to truly understand just by looking at that surface level.
Yeah, yeah. So now why don't you officially introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you again so much for having me here. My name is Dr. Sasha. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor and a doctor of education. I currently work private practice and therapy with adults, families, couples. Most of my specialty lies in early childhood trauma. So I spent most of my clinical years in practice working with children, the 0 to 5 age population. So I worked with a lot of low income families, children who were dealing with single parent households, high divorce rates, really trying to address the issues at the root. It was amazing that when I started to do my work, how quickly I realized that these challenges that I started to see arise in these little 3 year olds and these little 2 year olds, I would see them in 25 year olds and 30 year olds. And I kind of sparked up this interest for me of, is it possible that so many of these wounds and these challenges that we experience in childhood that go unrepaired continue to find ways to manifest themselves way, way later in life in ways that sometimes we can't even connect the dots to until someone helps us do the work and bring awareness to what's happening.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're here and that you are bringing that awareness. My background is in education as well, and I feel like I have a little button. I don't know where I stuck it. Oh, here we go. It's if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Oof, I
So,
love that one.
yeah, education is super important. So, but back to trauma and children, is there anyone who doesn't have childhood trauma?
You know, it's so great that you asked this question because one thing I've learned myself is when we truly understand what trauma is, you can't help but see it everywhere, right? So many people think that trauma really is the traumatic things that happen to us. You know,
Mhm.
parental divorces, abuse, neglect, the scary, overwhelming things that children go through. And those are the things that in our field, we call the traumatic experiences. But trauma really is what's happening inside your body in that nervous system of yours throughout these experiences. And so it could be sometimes you see trauma occurring with the child who's being ignored at the grocery store when they're upset and they're throwing the tantrum, and you see their parent yell to turn and just start yelling at them. Well, on the surface, some people will not say, "Oh, that's traumatizing for a child. They'll get over." The real thing is the trauma is what's happening inside that child's body, which might mean the sudden awareness that my emotions may not be safe with my caregiver, or my
Mhm.
caregiver might get overwhelmed with what I'm experiencing, or this must be my doing. This is my fault. And how am I going to start shaping my behavior, my sense of self to now start navigating this world? And I truly do believe that no parent is perfect. And because no parent is perfect, it's likely that things can happen that could lead to trauma. These ruptures that we call about the relationship within the relationship. However, repair is always possible to help really mitigate some of the effects of what we call trauma. But it's hard to say that nobody doesn't have trauma. I think to some extent, all of us have something happening to our nervous system that really shapes how we navigate and how we try to flow in this life safely.
Yeah, so that makes me think there must be other misconceptions because with trauma, everyone, I think a lot of us feel like it's just me or a few people who have it, but you're saying that everybody
Oof.
has it. So
Oh
what are
man,
some
I wish everyone.
other
Yeah.
misconceptions about trauma? I mean, I think one of them is that people say it's usually tied to an event. Is
Right,
that true?
right. Sometimes trauma can be tied to a singular traumatic event, and trauma can also build up over a series of events, right?
Mhm.
We think about a lot of children that come up in pretty stable, like affluent households where we would look on the outside and say, wow, these kids got everything. There's no issue. But for
Mhm.
some kids, that trauma can build, for example, every time they are waiting to get picked up at school and they're looking around, and almost every day their caregiver just keeps showing up late, and
Mm.
they're looking around and they see all these other kids getting picked up, and every other day they have to walk over to the office because somebody wasn't there to pick them up on time like they promised.
Mhm.
That in itself can slowly start to create trauma in the nervous system. Safety and lack of trust around, will anybody be there for me? Can I
Yeah.
count on people to show up when they tell me they're there? Can I trust adults when they tell me, I got you? Do they? And so,
Mm.
even in these small little moments, can create trauma within the nervous system that, again, shapes how we begin to understand the world, understand ourselves, and navigate the chaos that sometimes just exists out there.
Yeah, so something you said makes me think of an interview I did a while ago where someone said, I think she was a neurobiologist, and she said trauma can be your big T and your little t. And she said sometimes it's something big, but sometimes it's too little for too long.
Yep, absolutely. Right. We think about our kids that, for example, may sometimes struggle with food security, right? Just going to back home every day from school, wondering, like, am I going to have dinner today? Is there going to be enough food? These small little experiences begin to shape your nervous system around, what can I expect? Is this okay? And how that manifests in adulthood can really start to look way more grandiose than, oh, I don't know if I'm going to eat today. It might look like I might start hoarding food when I get older because I don't know if I'm going to have food the next day or not.
Hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I started answering the question for you,
Not at
but
all.
any other misconceptions about trauma that you see a lot with people?
Yeah, I think a lot of people sometimes think with trauma that, once you're traumatized, like, hey, like you're pretty much screwed for the rest of your life. And the
Mhm.
reality is that that's never really the case. Trauma takes place in the body, it happens in relations. And guess what? With the work that we can do, trauma can absolutely be repaired at any age. In fact, the parents that I work with who work with their younger children, I let them know it's never too late to begin the repair process, not even just with yourself, but with your children. So, whether your child is a younger child, age 3, 4, 5, whether you're an older parent and your child is in their teenage years, in their 20s, in their 30s, and you're questioning, is it too late for me to start addressing the ruptures that occurred in my childhood, in my child's childhood? The answer, it's never too late. We as adults are always giving our parents a chance to get it right. For many adults I've worked with who are like, Sasha, I called my mom and I don't know why I was expecting anything different. She said the same exact stuff. And even
Mhm.
to our deepest core, we are willing to give our parents a chance to just get it right and start that repair process with us. So I put that out there to all parents, that if you're looking back at your own life or your child's life and being like, man, I dropped the ball, I messed up, and there's nothing I can do about it, I want to let you know that there is so much that you can do about it.
So I love the example that you just mentioned where, let's say, I want to deal with my parents and the trauma that happened between us, but then I reach out and they're not really interested and they won't
Yeah,
acknowledge what happened. And I imagine that happens often. So
very
what happens
much.
if you want to work on things and the person that created the situation is not interested or not available?
Great question. And to be honest, right, like this happens so often because for so many of us, like our parents have passed and there may not be an opportunity to actually sit with them. And so much of the healing does happen internally with trying to reconnect with yourself and trying to heal the wounds that were created and passed down. For so many of us, we have to, in some ways, look at the wounds that were given to us by our parents, and we have to sometimes look at it with a lens of compassion because our parents weren't perfect. They were obviously sometimes parenting with the own blueprint that they had and the lack of awareness that they brought to the table. And so we will be met so many times with parents who sometimes don't get it. Sometimes their own anxieties and their own shame might make it really difficult for them to accept and acknowledge. And so for many of us, right, we all have this little inner child in us that's still activated, that's still wanting to be seen, that still wants validation. And when it's difficult for the external forces to give that to us, the real force is yourself turning inwards and telling that little child, I see you. What happened to you was not okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel what you need to feel and really begin that journey of what we call reparenting, trying to parent that child inside of you because others may not do it for you. And probably it's not going to be their responsibility to heal you as well.
Yeah. So, in terms of getting support to deal with trauma, is it something that you should be thinking about mostly talk therapy, or are there other modalities?
Yes, and yes, right? Talk therapy can be a wonderful space for you to hopefully just have a safe space with someone you trust that can help you process some of these wounds and how they've rippled and manifested into the present. But at the same time, the truth is that healing happens in relationships. From the moment we're born, the first experience that we have is relational. Even for us in the womb, that experience that we have with our caregiver is very relational. And so while talk therapy is very beneficial, right, finding a community of support can be one of the most influential things to help yourself heal. And then on top of it, trauma, like we said, it takes place in the body. So while talking about it can be very helpful, as we say, if it's shareable, it's bearable, it also another way to see how do you reconnect with your body in that point. When we go through traumatizing experiences or when trauma is occurring in the body, there's an impact it's having on the nervous system. And to some extent, what happens is the mind and the body slowly begins to disconnect just out of safety. When we're born, we're very in tune with gut intuitions, our gut feelings. When babies are tired and sad and hungry, they'll cry. They don't stop and wonder, like, like, should I express myself to get what I no, like they'll cry, they want their demands met. It's only as we start to get older and the traumas happen do we then start to question, hey, I have this need, I have this emotion. What do I do? How are people going to respond? Like, oh, am I going to get judged? Yada. And so we start to get more and more disconnected from the body. And so much trauma work, along with the talk therapy and the healing, is also about reconnecting with the body. I love encouraging people to engage in things like exercise, going on long walks. Yoga is just one of my personal favorites because it really forces you to slow down, take deep breaths, connect with your body. Even with many of my trainer friends, they call it the mind muscle connection when you're working out. Trauma really disconnects that from us. And all these physical activities sometimes allow us to slow down, reconnect with our body, so that in the moments when we are triggered or the trauma begins to manifest itself, we actually have a better awareness of what's happening. Like, okay, oh my gosh, like I'm getting a shortness of breath. Like, what's happening here? Like, oh my gosh, like my body's getting very tight. Like, what's happening here? And gaining the awareness to your body allows you to have a little bit more control over some of those more triggering, scary moments that we feel that we have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. So in terms of the movement, the exercise and moving around, I'm assuming you know what bilateral movement is.
Yes, yeah,
Can you talk
absolutely.
about how certain activity, well, first explain what that is and how those that may affect your body in a good
Yeah,
way?
so yes, bilateral movement really comes to when uh, both sides of their body kind of are really being controlled together. You got your left side of the brain, right side of the brain, and you're really trying to activate both of these things together. One of my favorite things to just simply do is talk and walk, right? A lot of my younger therapy clients, the teenagers, it's hard for them to just sit in place and just being able to talk. It creates sometimes a little bit of discomfort. And so, what we can do is we'll go outside for walks, and
Mhm.
walking in itself forces the brain to kind of focus on its movement, coordination, regulation. And then when you top that off with the talking and some of the more difficult things that we engage in, it actually sometimes helps the body feel just a little bit more regulated. And
Mhm.
it creates just a little bit less tension on the body when it's going through something a little bit difficult. And I think it's one of the most fascinating things and one of the most amazing things about therapy and the healing process in itself too.
Yeah. So another thing you mentioned that I want to make sure I talk about is the power of community. So
Yes.
we completely agree. We have a weekly legal abuse support group. We blend our male and female clients together. It's amazing and wonderful. But sometimes people end up in communities that are harmful to them
Yes.
because it is it keeps them in what we call a trauma loop. Like it kind of
Yes.
focuses on being a victim. And our community often is dealing with very difficult legal system, a very difficult ex who feels like they're being rewarded. And
Yep.
so sometimes there's a tendency to do what we call doom scrolling and looking
Ah,
online for like the worst stories. And I feel like that kind of community is not helpful. Can you talk about
I
how
bet.
someone could tell when a community is beneficial versus when it sounds really great, but it's not actually helping improve your brain?
Love that. My favorite word is compassion, compassion, compassion. Even in the most toughest times, a group that can really welcome this concept of compassion, self compassion, compassion for the other, even in the most frustrating, difficult, challenging times, I think can be sometimes the most beneficial thing to our mental well being. We deal with a lot of crappy people. We deal with a lot of people sometimes where it's going to be easy to pick out the negatives and find the worst things in them that lead us down this spiral of, hatred and anger and just even blame towards ourselves. In the healing journey, one of the hardest things for us to create is compassion. Compassion for the people that wronged us, compassion for the mistakes of ourselves that we may have done, compassion to find in uh, just the faults of others. Because if not, it becomes so easy to just slip into that space of resentment, anger, hatred, which for some people can make them feel very powerful. But
Mm.
those emotions at the end of the day, if kind of manifested inappropriately, can do more damage to us than to the other person. And so I do have a lot of clients who are going through like high conflict divorces, and things kind of play out there. And as difficult as it is, I really try to encourage this idea of having compassion for the other individual. Even if the other individual is making choices and acting in certain ways that are not okay, that you don't agree with, that you think still requires boundaries, and it should, keep in mind that that other person was still once a little child, a traumatized individual, potentially someone who didn't learn the tools of navigation and might even be still acting in survival mode and survival mechanisms. And when we do those things, sometimes we act and behave in ways that are just hurtful, inappropriate, not okay. And we can lose sight of that really quick as human beings. As a therapist, we're taught, hey, you got to have compassion, right? I mean, we even think about our good old president over here, right? Where it's so easy to pick out the things, and people forget, like, it's not okay what he does sometimes and the things he says, but he also came from a very traumatized childhood,
Mhm.
very, very horrible sociopathic father that was extremely abusive. And so while it doesn't excuse his behaviors today, it doesn't say, okay, well, all right, that's all right why he does what he does. It helps you understand just a little bit better so that what's happening in your body and how you navigate the pain and frustrations becomes a little bit easier to manage. So if you find yourself in a group that's just spewing just things to hate the other person and to blame the other person and to find this and wrong and to find blame with yourself, those are going to be the groups that might cause you way more pain than helping you find peace despite what the other person might be doing.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I feel like any community that just focuses on keeping you as a victim and making you feel helpless
Yeah.
rather than uh, showing you ways that you do have power and you do have agency in your life is
Yes.
not going to be helpful.
Excellent. There you go.
You want to start developing some confidence on what you can control and what you can do in your
Right.
own life, even if you're in a very difficult system and dealing with a very difficult adversary.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that.
Yeah. So what are some other things? I mean, we talked about a couple of good things that people could do. Some other tips for people who are really struggling right now, especially against that difficult adversary, and
Hmm.
they feel like I want to be a better parent, but I've got all this stuff with myself, and I'm so stressed out, and I don't have any time. Is there a way to still start dealing with trauma?
Yeah. I love that you bring up this idea that, I just don't have time. Because sometimes I do have a lot of clients too that really think about this idea that healing is like, you have to dedicate all this amount of time to sit and really do the work, right? Oh, I got to attend therapy, once and 1 hour every week. I got to make sure I journal every night before I go to bed. Oh, I got to get up every morning, Sasha, and I got to make sure I meditate as part of my healing. And it's like, that can be helpful. Like, don't get me wrong. But healing really happens in these small, little, tiny moments of change, right? That moment that you're rushing out the door and you just pause for a second and you're like, that's healing, right? The moment that you yell at your child and then you realize I yelled at them and you pause and you're like, I'm sorry, that wasn't okay. That's healing, right? The moment you're doing your work and you're like, oh God, I'm so stupid. And you stop and you're like, I'm not stupid. This was okay. That's healing, right? And so I love to tell my clients, everybody, that it's in these small, tiny little moments throughout your day that you can start to implement that creates healing work. If you want to add like a chunk of time throughout your day to be able to go exercise, hey, go ahead. But if you're at your desk at work and you just need like 2 minutes to get up, to just go walk and just regulate your body, that's healing. Right? It's in these short, tiny little moments that really happen. And I want to take that pressure off of people to think that, healing myself or even healing with my child has to take these huge chunks of time. Even our children, they probably require maybe about 10 minutes of quality time a day. Like that's really about it. Like if you could give them more, shoot, go for it, right? But again, it's small little doses that create healing. You can even think about when your doctor prescribes you medication. They're never going to say, all right, here's your medication, take all the pills at once and you're going to be good. You're like, that actually might cause you more harm if you do all of it at once. And so
Mhm.
instead, they tell you, hey, take one pill, one in the morning, one in the night, and that's enough. Hey, if you forget to do it, don't double up. Just get back on and keep up with your dosage, and that's what it's going to be to kind of get you where you're at. And it's no different than our healing journey. For these small little doses throughout our day, throughout our week, create more of an impact than being like, all right, I gotta sit and spend this entire time dedicated to my healing.
I love this because as you're talking, I'm thinking of the huge parallel with what we do with our clients. And so one of the things, those waving tube guys outside like used
Yeah.
cars. So that's our little victory symbol, but we use it for marking progress. So when you're saying
Oh,
microdoses of healing, I'm like, for us, it's progress. That it
I
doesn't
love
have to
that.
be some huge court victory. It could be that you created a boundary and you adhered to it, or that you wrote a
Yes.
communication and your ex was silent instead of attacking you because they didn't know what to do after you said it. Or even that you got through something, you got through 10 minutes that was supposed to be terrifying and you did it. But things
Yep.
like that, the micro doses of healing and progress, that's when you need to celebrate yourself. And I love, Sasha,
Yes.
too, how it's almost like self talk is part of
Hmm.
that healing journey, and progress is
Absolutely.
learning to tell yourself, like, I can pause, I can think about it. I don't need to be as harsh on myself as I might have been, and I'll
Yeah.
look at it a little bit differently. And even learning to
Yes.
pause
Right.
instead of just
Oh my gosh.
reacting all the time. That's progress,
It
right?
is huge, right? Going even from this unconscious state to suddenly having conscious awareness, that is huge because so
Right.
many of us since childhood formed these beliefs and these ways of being, and it went into our unconscious. And every way that we started to operate since then has just been automatic. It's just automatic. And moving from that space to presence, life changing.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so much for talking about that. I'm very excited. I feel so
Of course.
energized by this talk. Can you tell people how to find you and a little more, like if there's
Yes.
something in particular that you're offering?
Yeah, I do offer it for all my California. If you're in California, I'm licensed here in California. If you're looking for parent coaching, family therapy, individual therapy, I'm always here to provide that support. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Reiisi, where I talk everything attachment, healing, inner child healing with a little bit of humor to help you kind of bring some of these things to light. You can find me on TikTok as well. Um, and that's really just about it. I love being here to just share the knowledge with the world. A lot of people sometimes got services and things to sign up for. I'm just here to share the wealth of knowledge of things that I've gained over the last 10 plus years in this field that I think everybody should have access to. Oh my gosh, right? It always broke my heart that some people had to come for services before they got introduced to some of this amazing, amazing material. And so I would love to have y'all flock over to me, read some of these things, have it connect with you, and see if it can get you started on your own healing journey too.
Yeah, I don't know if you see the comment. It says Dr. Racy is the best.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Sasha, for coming on and getting
My
us all
pleasure,
feeling
Lisa.
good.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a wonderful, wonderful time with you.
All right, let's definitely stay in touch.
All right, will do.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.